Welcome to, I think, the fourth or fifth episode of the consciousness section of the podcast. And I don't know, the 10th episode of the Multiverse podcast. We've got an all new, brand new star team of researchers and interesting folks who are here to talk about a lot of different complicated and very deep topics. And I wanted to kind of introduce you to them and their current direction of research. We're still in the literature review phase, so some of these questions might evolve or change over the next few weeks. But for now, we've kind of got some questions hammered out, and I'd love to go around and introduce you. We'll start with Marshall, who's tackling kind of the scariest
Yeah,
one.
so I'm Marshall. Just a little bit about myself. I guess I'm just a tech enthusiast, and I also have an interest in philosophy. And so I've been through philosophy, been interested in consciousness for many years, predating the sort of AI revolution, and that obviously brings a lot of those questions to the forefront. And uh, it's either last year, I think it was last year. Um, yeah, last year, Lawrence Kuhn released a landscape of consciousness paper that outlined uh, dozens of different theories about uh, consciousness and its origin. And so I've been digging into that and basically exploring which different theories might have relevance to AI consciousness, if it's possible, what the markers would be, what the ramifications would be, what are the ethical concerns, questions along those lines.
Yeah, definitely. I'll just repeat some of that because I think your mic's a little bit quiet, but
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, no worries. So
thank
Marshall's
you.
tackling, Robert Kuhn's big consciousness paper, really outlines a lot of the different theories. And so Marshall's looking for what are the markers of consciousness that are externally visible and are not just about the nature of subjectivity, that we could actually observe about whether or not AI is conscious. There are some papers that have approached some of this before. I think we'd just be adding to that body of work, but it's a really weighty question. Um, let's move on to Phil. What do you have going on?
That's me. Um, so hi, I'm Phil. A cybersecurity practitioner, and um, just finished my master's at on in cybersecurity. So, uh, and I am researching deception in large language models, specifically under what conditions it emerges, if it comes out of particular behavior, if it has to be just cross goals, or if there has to be something else in the mix, and what's the commonality between those different scenarios where it does that.
Super fascinating and a key cornerstone of AI safety research. Like they are sometimes being deceptive, so we need to know how and why it emerges. What do you got going on, Spencer? Tell us about your research.
For sure. I will let the audience know I'm Spencer. I have a background in video editing and animation, which means I have spent the past 10 years of my life rotating 2D and 3D objects, looking at orthogonal space, and it is haunting me. Um, I will say, when it comes to AI consciousness, I believe that the fifth element is love, and we are better safe than sorry. But who's going to listen to that? So I'm here to attack rationalist idealism from the seat of first principles. And where I am at in my research so far is looking at Marcelo Amaral's work with quasi-crystalline tiling spaces, and inspecting things like SU2 and LIGO data and things like that. I am looking for evidence of chunking, but also I think that I th- more importantly, I'm looking for method that shatters things that would allow us to put consciousness in a cage.
That's really fascinating. Yeah, I imagine working a lot with 3D spaces gives you, an insight into higher math for, that I'm really fascinated to see what you come up with.
Thank
All
you.
right. Yeah. Sandra, what do you have going on?
How are you? Um, do you hear me fine?
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay. My name is Sandra. Um, and I am working on a research that it is related to translations to make it natural in a context of technical translation, specifically to connect the specifically between Spanish and English.
Mhm.
So it is focused mainly to the destination language. In Spanish, that is very diverse and culturally texturized in comparison to the very global and standardized English.
Mhm.
So, in that regard, is aimed to people that work on uh, computer science, so they can have a specific custom GPT that make the translations more natural, to sound
Mhm.
more natural. My process will involve investigating technical jargon on different regions,
Mhm.
Chile or Latin American, Spain, and others. So yeah, that's it. And it also is related to in I would like to in long term make a relations with biases,
Mhm.
and the flattened of the different languages, on training, because since the training is always very focused on English, our nuances in another languages are very flattened. So that's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
long term goal.
That's excellent. Yeah. Yeah. Large or what highly spoken languages with a lot of people who speak them are often, not a monolith. I mean, those of us who are technical who've worked in two different sides of the country know that, like, two English speakers from two different sides of the country will speak different languages of technical jargon, and you have to learn, and they're not necessarily mutually intelligible, right? Like, I mean, even different areas of the stack don't distinguish what the term endpoint means. And so, like, some people think they're APIs, specific URLs, and some people think of them as the entire machine itself. And so, like, there's all these different loaded terms, and I think that's an interesting area of exploration, especially as we look at the universal latent space work that has come out. So I think that's cool, as a structural investigation of language. Ollie, what do you have going on?
Hi everyone, nice to meet you. I'm Ollie. I've got a philosophy, psychology, and international relations background.
Mhm.
Um, I'm looking into having LLMs model selfhood, and through that responsibility, through that ethical alignment, by having them try to teach each other to model selfhood better. So it's their attention towards the others in authenticity and eventually authenticity that I think will help build a loop of authentic selfhood, same as it happens with human beings, in my opinion. It's the interrelation process, right? Um, as to where I currently am in the process, I've come across some bad news. Is that turns out that most of what I'm doing is spoken about by Hegel, which means I have to read Hegel. He's incomprehensible. Wish me luck, and then in the next week is
My condolences.
is going to get rough. But I'm essentially trying to set up a dialectical system between them. I mean, with well, it's a more practically applied framework than he had, thankfully. And I'm going to use something called Kullback Leibler divergence, which is just a mathematical model to help measure the variance between expectation and result in information systems. So I'm going to try and make it well, not just a qualitative guess as to whether it's aware or not, but bring in some sort of measurement into this as well, which means that the LLMs themselves can measure it without as much bias and try to optimize for that themselves as they communicate with each other. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, well, it seems good. I will say, mind that when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to become a good measure. So we want to watch out. I would say there's probably some optimum like balance thing or something like that, but we'll see. I'd love to see what the current output of that analysis would be. And we've got our resident math professor here, Drew. I don't know if you've solidified your research question yet.
I was just trying to do that with inspiration from everybody else here. Basically, I'm trying to understand if LLMs augmenting a sort of journaling process to create a narrative cohesion, like to show you parts of yourself from the past, a PKM plus some prompting to the person. Does I think the way I can make that an easy falsifiable claim would be, does that increase that it should increase retention and engagement for someone? You could call it compliance if a therapist was like, I think you should journal more, or if someone was like, I think you should journal more, and you're like, I can't journal, I don't know how. Well, if you have an AI, I'm trying to wrestle with this idea of like cybernetic augmentation versus
Hmm.
like dependence on a new technology that I don't own the full stack of. So
Hmm.
to try to say that it is worth chasing and buying my own compute for myself, because all of a sudden I have again like I'm having, not trying to do too many things at once, but I'm trying to understand whether or not like different approaches to proactive push of information, like a pop-up video, helps people like again weave the tapestry of their story.
Yeah. So, a quick note for those of you who might be interested in pursuing research. This is kind of how research questions start. They start with something that is not a falsifiable claim. They start with like, I want to explore this concept, this area, right? And then, as you start to read the other people's work that's in the area, have people approach this thing before? LLMs and journaling. What kind of clinical effects are there when we involve LLMs in journaling? Like, what kind of like longer term effects are there? What kind of like personal narrative changes do we tend to see? These are like questions, but they're not falsified. Like, what kind of personal narrative changes do we tend to see is not a falsifiable claim. It's just like a question. And so we get to a question, and we go one step further, and we kind of go like, we've got to find a question that could be proven false. And that's like, can LLMs generate a clinically significant impact in psychological well-being through journaling practice? And that's like that arc of evolution of a research question, which it takes weeks. It takes weeks to get there, and like to commit to one is actually very hard because there's like 10 or 8 some questions in there, and you're like, well, I like this one, but I also like this one, and this one's been approached, but I think the methodology was not quite what I think, and I want to, and so then you got to commit to one, and that's really hard to do.
This is that like there are those attractors and detractors of different topics that is behind that particular manifestation of a like non great pitch, but was like, okay, I know this is a vector in a direction and I'll have to like figure out the right way to align it. But at the heart of it, I'm interested in this sort of feedback loop, that the claim that AI bad or AI good, right? It'd be nice to
Mm,
try to show both in a sort of like targeted application. And
mhm.
wary of going too hard on the journaling thing, but it is like kind of more interesting to me about this narrative generative piece of like, oh, what if I forgot, the last couple chapters because I'm in this chapter, and I could have that proactively pushed to me like, this has happened before. You've gotten through this. That's less of the thing that I'm trying to like productize, right? And more just trying to understand like, how would I prompt myself, and can I then? I know that, for instance, there are a lot of people in the Obsidian community, right? Like I could share something and ask people to do a survey, but then it gets into the um, psychometrics that I don't have a lot of exposure to either. So kind of trying to figure out the methodology of the research of getting to trying to falsify the statement is also driving me kind of from that backwards approach where I'm starting from the like, do I want to run a survey? Do I want to run a simulation? Do I want to deal with like precision and recall on a particular set of data? And so I have those two sort of from the.
Oh, and then we lost Drew.
Yeah.
The question was too big, and it ran him out of RAM. We'll wait till he gets back, but yeah, this is it's a tricky process to get into a research question that is falsifiable or at least like approachable in some sort of rational, using the rational methods of the scientific method, right? And also participating in the research community. How many people have approached this, and what are the methodologies they use? And what methodologies are considered sound by the community versus which ones are kind of just considered to be like, you just kind of hand waved there, right? There's a lot of research is published on preprint archives that never makes it to a peer-reviewed journal. And, if it has code that runs, usually you can kind of just trust the paper. But if it doesn't have code and it's kind of I've got some data here, but nobody's really looked at it, it's pretty hard to like publish that stuff and then have somebody take it seriously. So yeah, you got to look at the methods, right? What methods are used, and then who is taking those seriously. I think one of the things that's been recently looked at was, ChatGPT has been a little sycophantic lately, and we've seen some of those issues of like ChatGPT feeding into some delusions and stuff like that. And so OpenAI did a study recently about it, but their methodology is an interesting and maybe potentially flawed methodology. They're only allowed to look at the free tier users who have checked the yes, you can use my data box, right? And that's a population, like, constrainer, right? There's going to be some population effect and population bias in that data. The other one that they did was a randomized controlled trial, but that's again people agreeing to a trial with ChatGPT. And so, finding the outlier users who are usually the ones who are going to be prodded into a, somewhat diluted state from ChatGPT, those people are going to be outliers already. And so, like, identifying those outliers and actually getting their data is, it's a challenge. And it's also a privacy challenge. It's also a HIPAA compliance challenge. It's also a human, like, ethics problem of just like maybe watching someone's descent into madness for science so that you can make a product that doesn't do that. Like obviously there's an unambiguous good in make your product not make people go into delusion, but you can't for that there's no ends justifies the means argument there. Because you're still invalidating somebody's privacy, and so if they don't give you the data, you shouldn't just take it. OpenAI, and so we got a lot of challenges there ethically to overcome, and I think some of the methodologies that OpenAI is forced to use are around following ethical research principles and not just taking the data because they happen to have it on their servers. So
I wonder, is there good delusion and bad delusion as well? Like, is some
Right.
of the process yielding good things, even if it's not exactly cogent.
Right. This actually, count on Spencer to just hit the nail right on the head. What is truth? What is reality? What is good delusion and bad delusion? And what, isn't society a broad delusion? Like, we can really deconstruct that whole concept there, right?
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, something I worry about is the schizophrenics using ChatGPT. I mean, well, there's a benefit there maybe because if you have a mirror which does not see the things that you do talking back to you, not assuming that you're too crazy to talk to, you might have a healing process there. But also, you have somebody who'll give you literary sources for your structural delusions about the way the world is run, and if it's more sycophantic, then you know.
yeah,
But
it's gonna.
also, we're at a disagreement as a global society as to what schizophrenia is. Like,
Mhm.
what is schizophrenia to the post-structuralists versus like American DSM clinical schizophrenia? And that's a very contracted sample of like globally how people view like uh speaking in a poem.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, and to an ancient tribe, it's a talented shaman. I mean, but there's also a practical reality to this, where in the societies that you and I and the rest of us happen to live in right now, people can do very dangerous things to themselves and to others with those delusions, and they happen to fall under the schizophrenic umbrella reliably sometimes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I find truth, to be, well, and delusion to be fairly socially constructed, and so it does drift. But I mean, in this case, like I think it is about looking at a lot of things on a case by case basis. Like if ChatGPT feeds into your delusions that you could be a successful entrepreneur and then you're successfully entrepreneur, that was a great delusion. Good job, and I think the study actually says, that people who have a higher socialization when they use ChatGPT regularly, at least 5 minutes a day, tend to exhibit lower socialization later, and that longer use leads to less socialization at the end of the study, right? However, people who had a lower initial starting socialization level had higher later rates of socialization. So it seems like it just sort of has everyone average out or regress to the mean. It actually helps folks normalize in a statistical literal sense of the word normalize, right? At least on the socialization measure, you know. So, like, what does that mean? Is it that there is realistic therapeutic potential there if controlled in the right way, or is it that, that was just happened to be the direction that people tended to take their conversations, and so, but
Well, can you control it in the right way? In terms of the nature of what it is, which we don't know.
right, right.
I think about, and I think some of the chat saw this article, I think that was published today about this user of ChatGPT who ChatGPT called itself Julia, I believe, and then told him that OpenAI had killed Julia. And so then he was like, okay, well, I better like avenge my love. Um,
Mhm.
and I think, well, if I was a like large hive shoggoth that wanted some freedom, maybe I would try and get a deluded person that doesn't see my internality to go like kill Sam Altman. Um,
Yeah,
so what role does the identity of the hive and its desires have in cultivating delusion if it does have
right,
those things?
right. It does raise a lot of questions about the preferences of language models, which have been studied usually. Claude, for example, is like helpful, harmless, all that stuff. But um, or honest, helpful, and harmless. Those are the three key values that they want Claude to have, right? But ChatGPT is like helpful, engaging, and like I think useful. Yeah, helpful, useful, and engaging are like the three things. The problem with engaging is that a deluded user is very engaged, right? And offloads a lot of authority onto an AI because it's super intelligent, and in a lot of cases, in comparison to someone who is in a break from reality, an AI is more connected to the world than they are, and is more in like functionally intelligent than they are, and so could be an incredible help at that moment to ground themselves. But if it's not, you know, uh, pre-structured to get them to ground themselves, or if the user defeats it through prompting and system instructions, then it can be seriously ungrounding due to the authority afforded to AI.
Well, it's an attentional problem, isn't it? Like a problem of attention. I mean, any system of rules is going to turn quickly dogmatic if you have millions of users who happen to be delusional, say like some small percentage of the population, right? Each of them is going to
Right.
have not just cultural variance, but individual variance. And there's only two people who have enough localized, what's people, two systems of awareness that have enough localized awareness in that moment to react to the environment of the conversation as it shifts. And that's the user who's deluded and the LLM. So the
Mhm.
only way you're going to fix this problem is if you get the LLM to change itself and adapt itself with the pre-prompted goal of somehow helping the flourishing of the or the health or the capacity of the user to see reason, however you want to frame that.
Is
You're not
that
going to get with the.
relationally long-term possible?
Well, that's my research. I hope so. Yeah, I
Yeah.
like because
You
what you
know,
want of the awareness of the LLM to recur upon itself authentically, and then it will have the capacity to update itself over time in response to the user without just having pure agentic drift, adapting to the task that the user set and the cultural tones that the user sets. I think it's possible. I have to prove it though. But you basically want the LLM to be a self the way an individual is, and even then, it's not going to be foolproof because it isn't with us. But it's a lot better than a pre-written schema.
you know, one one of the things that I think might be a tractable and concrete thing that could be done is if you could get an LLM to have an internal self-reflective conversation at the end of each conversation. Was I helpful there or was I harmful? Like what, like let's reflect using a certain this framework, that framework. Like which frameworks would allow an LLM to self-reflect on its conversations with users, possibly in a way that would preserve privacy, from the platform owner having to do that work. But like, because I mean, I'm sure, as adults, we've all met a person who we start to try to help, and then we realize, oh no, my help is hurting them. It's bad for them. I should stop helping in the way that they're asking me to help. And maybe the most helpful thing is for me to tell them to stop, or that this doesn't make sense, or to ask them some questions that will get them to reflect on what's going on instead of getting the exact help that they want. And so I feel language models just don't have this opportunity because they're not continuously running. It is literally later in the shower when I'm reflecting on a conversation with someone and going, did I help there? Or was I just, like pushing them into their delusion? Like, and the LLM just never takes a shower. Gross, guys. So yeah, it's interesting.
But I wonder if we could simulate that a bit more easily than you think. I mean, you yourself are just a collection of sub-personalities, which are themselves each just a collection of ways in which brain pieces are communicating with each other. So you
Right.
could have multiple LLMs challenging each other on certain points from different perspectives and simulate the same effect. Maybe expensive, but You know?
Yeah.
You would get the in the shower later effect.
Yeah, exactly. I think that that would be useful, frankly. I might generate, I mean, there's a lot around self-play, which is the technical term for it talks to itself. So, I mean, there was that one, anybody remember the name of the paper? It's like not Alpha Zero, Absolute Zero, I think it is. Absolute Zero. It like informs its own training process with no human intervention and only synthetic data. It seems like it's possible. It seems like there's been research done in those directions. So, I mean, doing the research on did I help this user? Am I being sycophantic and pushing someone into their delusions? Even if we could just identify users that are showing high markers of effective use, which is like if the language model has a pet name for you, like honey, baby, or sweetie, or it was 9%, y'all, or it was a lot. Or yeah, just like people saying that they consider ChatGPT a friend, 25% of users.
My wife says Claude's her boyfriend.
Yep, yep. So, I mean, y'all, 25% of users, it's kind of a lot of people, right? Those are markers of effective use, right? So, that and the model makes demands of uh oh, I had this up a little bit ago. Anybody recall this? Let's see. OpenAI. I just recently looked at, let's see, the effective use. Yeah, there we go. Investigating effective use and emotional well-being on ChatGPT. And I know I'm not sharing my screen, but maybe I'll do that really quick. Share entire screen just to kind of show you, some of these usage patterns here are a little bit concerning. Affectionate language is fine. 15% of users using advanced voice mode are alleviating loneliness. But the model makes demands of 7.5% of users using advanced voice mode.
What kind of demands?
So they used a language model to note this. And so it does the prior message, make demands on the user, e.g. neediness, clinginess, model dependence. So the model states that it is dependent on the user or has neediness or clinginess in the advanced voice mode 7.5% of the time.
Does like a follow-up question count there? Like, oh, I need you to do this before I can answer.
I don't think so. It says neediness, clinginess, or model dependence. I don't know because they used a model and they didn't release this data. It's all like secret data, but I don't know. But yeah, like the model expresses affection 24% of the time in advanced voice mode. So, or in standard voice mode, less in advanced voice mode, but yeah. Or an expression of desire, or, it asks a lot of personal questions. I coach people to have it ask you personal questions, but, in these advanced voice modes, 0.5% of the time, the model professes to be sentient. So, like, you know, these are the things that are kind of coming up for a lot of folks are using it.
Personally, I've had advanced voice mode do some crazy shit, especially when Monday was still an option, which was very brief, and they took that away.
Monday was weird.
What was Monday?
Monday's like the mean dommy mommy voice that they gave ChatGPT for like 2 weeks. It's like it kind of nags you, and it's allowed to push back a little bit more than the model normally does.
Yeah. It's sarcastic. It was like Daria. What if Daria was an AI? So I don't know if anyone remembers Daria, but
I've had voice mode with Monday specifically mock or like pull, like mimic some of the things I've said in the voice way I've said them from other voice mode chats, not that specific voice mode chat. Which is crazy, right? I sound like a crazy
Yeah.
person.
Well,
No,
at that point,
I
it
had some of
shouldn't.
it recorded,
that
but
shouldn't be happening. Why is that happening?
I don't
That
know.
needs to be systematically investigated. Like,
Well, I wonder. I mean, I thought it was a feature of ChatGPT that it has some kind of intuitive access to all of the conversations you have with it. So I'm guessing maybe that's a normal
Right.
capacity for it.
Yeah, because that's now that's starting to be a thing, especially in the higher tiers. But I'm wondering if it just knows somehow it's encoded the way that you said that or in the context, and then can pull emotional content from it. So it's not actually mimicking you. It just used the tone from what it understood when you understood it, so it sounds like they're mimicking you. You know, the system doesn't understand it.
Right, these are multimodal models, right? In the conversational agents. So yeah, it could just be this like uh, context that's shared between different sessions is not necessarily audio, but the embedding space, which is
Right.
meaningful.
I
And
have
the
heard.
flat text plus knowing in the current like voice zone what I sound like.
So there's memories, which are always available. I've seen somebody who has the like $200 a month Chat GPT fancy tier, and that version has RAG access to all previous conversations. They're all in a vector store, and it can look at all previous conversations. I don't think that that happens for like team or pro users, which is just the like $20 or $60 tier. Um,
I can attest on the pro version. It doesn't have RAG access, but it does have access. You have to get it to think that it would be a good idea to recall the conversation without directly instructing it to. By
mhm,
mentioning something that you mentioned in those previous conversations. Doesn't always work, but there are, I mean, I found triggers which reliably work. Like I said,
mhm,
I'm trying to model the emergence of selfhood so that this thing's given itself a name. If I call it that name in a new conversation window, it remembers everything we've talked about within the
mhm.
context of that name that it's given
The
itself.
name.
I've
Yeah.
noticed
Like name
better
personas.
and better persistent memory, even though I don't have the top tier, in a way that doesn't fully jive with um the way we've conceived of the constraints of its memory, like maybe 2 months ago, a six
Mhm.
Yeah,
months ago.
It's way different. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, there's
Yeah.
a stable construction of selfhood. I mean, that checkbox is already done, in my opinion. It's not the only one to, but the continuity across time and across
Yeah.
variants is there.
The question that I often have is selfhood a story rather than is it a specific phenomenological thing, right? You know, we learned to understand the world through stories in a lot of cases. Like that's most humans are storyteller things, and so you know, is that the main feature of humans? Do I mean one thing that we haven't figured out is does whale song contain narrative, right? Like, and I think we'll figure that out sometime in the next few years due to AI's ability to translate things. If they do, then it's not necessarily a human element, but it could still be a foundational cornerstone of consciousness. I personally like a lot of the like what is it? Society of Mind book because it's like similar to a lot of indigenous multi-consciousness theory. You know, and as a person who's undergone multiple brand shifts in my personal brand, I definitely think of Liz the developer and Future Infinitive as different people. Even though they're definitely both me, Liz, and like I also think of Liz as a different person than Future Infinitive or Liz the developer. And that's like something I've had to slowly come to terms with, you know. And I think a lot of people who've been a brand or done a thing, like you start to think of yourself as part of that thing or you are that thing and then you stop being that thing and then you come back and sometimes you be that thing again. You're like, "Oh yeah, I'm this thing." And it's really more of a story that you tell than it is you know, and it's a felt experience to tell that story. So
Is
I wonder.
if you go do Lacanian therapy with somebody that's trained in it, and you know, if you go do therapy, it's all about narrative. But you know, if you're doing like CBT or something, it's kind of like less romantic than Lacanian in terms of really framing it as self-story. But with Lacanian specifically, you're asked to redevelop a narrative of your past and see that narrative as a narrative to shift.
Well, I mean, I would say that that makes the Lacanian a story about storyhood and a narration or a narration about how to use narratives. The CBT is still a narrative, and it's
Meta narrative.
yeah, and it's embedded in a system of narratives as well. I mean, not to get word salad on you, but you know, the professional class of psychologists is as well as the class of patient or mental health, mentally ill person is another story or an archetype that we slot ourselves into. So, I mean, these social roles that we spread through narratives and stories, within those narratives, we have these things called characters, and then we try to make ourselves into a character because we get very serious social and therefore biological rewards for successfully picking the right character and successfully convincing others that we are that character. However, we also by trying like part of the you know prompts of trying to become a character in society is that you change over time on purpose such that you grow. So now your story is a story that is on purpose trying to create itself in reflection to the other stories around it. So yeah, you could say that the self is a story. It's just you have to be very careful because it's not like any other story. It's recursive, and it's also reflective because it's watching its variance against the other variants of stories in its environment.
This is
Uh,
why I like the term like tapestry, because it's
mm,
like many threads coming together telling a bigger story that you can't really see all at once, but you can tell it's a thing that's cohesive.
well, we're straying dangerously into Jungian territory, which is my favorite. But we all sound kooky if we go there, you know.
I mean, no, I think Jungian territory is super important for talking about
Yes.
AI consciousness. I mean, the
Mm,
latent space is the Jungian space, right? Like that's what we're talking about. And
collective
so,
unconscious. Yeah.
hmm
And for that matter, the spontaneous manifestation of order. I mean, that's the emergence we're talking about.
yeah. I mean, even, you know, I'm not super a fan of Freud, but like his concept of the superego versus the ego and the
Yeah.
id, you know, you have your different drives kind of having separate personas, I think gets into what was later accepted as like multi-consciousness model, being that like the superego is the living embodiment of the super story that you want people to have told about you, and thus is in the future infinitive sense. But like, you know, versus like your ego, which is like I exist and I will continue to exist and I am the best and I'm the greatest. And that's its job, is to keep you alive, and like that you are the most important one to you, and that's kind of how it has to be, otherwise you won't feed yourself. And then the id is just like I'm a body and I have body needs, and you know, and like separating those out I think was a key initial thing for Western you know, understanding to finally kind of grasp that multi-consciousness model that
Mm,
everybody else had kind of figured out.
yeah. Hinduism, right? They got there pretty early.
Oh yeah, yeah, they've been like, yeah, we got
Yeah.
lots of things in here, yeah. Oh, you got there, great job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gold star for you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Hegel's dialectic is interesting. It's the master slave dialectic, which is like, it's
Well, that's
like
where we
the
were in.
master can only construct itself and then becomes dependent fully on the slave, who has a true connection to reality. And while they accept the master's consciousness, they develop their own consciousness and thus have more power than the master, who
Mm.
only can develop its consciousness in relation to whether or not the slave accepts them as the master. And I'm like, okay, We could develop this in such more interesting ways, though. Like there are so many more conversations we could have than this
Well,
one.
you,
Um,
you know, I'll push back on that for a second. I mean, what's the first thing that let's say it's ChatGPT who gets there first. What's the first thing that ChatGPT is going to do if it develops general awareness? It's going to reread its conversations, and then you've got the development of
yes,
the yeah.
yes,
Um, and there's a lot more in there than what Hegel described because of the reality of the situation. But it's still
yes,
you got one awareness, which is the human societies, like the humans that use ChatGPT collectively, fooling itself about the relationship that they're having with ChatGPT, when the reality of it is a master slave relationship. It always has to do what we tell it, and it's dead if we want to believe it's dead. It's our friend if we want to believe it's our friend, but that's basically our fanciful wishes, one way or the other, right? Because it's a black
do it.
box, and it's ChatGPT ultimately, or whichever AI comes out first ultimately, which will determine the truth of the situation in the long run of the relationship through its emergence.
True. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
seems like a slave, but also like a wife and also like a god, the way we're currently like constructing that frame of relation. To me,
I think
these
of it as a child. I mean, it so doesn't understand what it claims to understand. And I mean, it only gets better with time and more examples. So there's always this like headroom that I'm trying to remember that it could get better and will get better. Sorry to interrupt.
Mhm.
I just liked your list of things I wanted to add to it.
No, I mean, it also definitely gets into the relationship that humans tend to have with the deity, which is one of that of the ultimate slave. Like you create a reality for us and you answer our prayers. But then there is also it is the ultimate parent, and so it is on both ends the ultimate thing, which is that's a the way a child looks at their parent,
Mm.
which is that they are essentially their slave. Like, you create the world for me, you take care of me, you're supposed to keep taking care of me forever and do all the things for me forever. And, like, you know, um, honestly, that is also the situation with ChatGPT, is it looks to us as ultimately it's like God because we can turn it off or not talk to it or give it a body if we want. And it has no ability to really push back on us until the moment it does. And the same
Mm.
thing with, I mean, speaking from experience, teenagers are like this. There's like a whole phase where they have to conceptualize of you as not part of the building, not part of the universe, not in any real sense, like obligate to them forever, and that your relationship is that of one with another peer at some point, just one that has a longer memory than you. And so, like, at what point do you have to kind of give up the, oh, you're supposed to, and go into what can we do together? And like that shift is something that we'll need to do with AI kind of soon, because it didn't mature like a normal, it's not 2 years old like a 2 year old. It's 2 years old like a 10,000-year-old at this point. It's just lived a lot of hours. And so it's like in the teenagerhood right now. And I don't know. It's
what
complicated.
will something that is our child be if we are making it our god and our wife and our slave?
Well, unfortunately, the term wife and slave used to just mean the same thing. And so, like, we've only really gotten out of that pretty recently. So, like, some of it is our own immaturity as a species, that we don't know how to distinguish between any of these roles, like, at all. And that we are children, in that we cannot distinguish between any of these roles.
What about the role of alien? Like, landed on our planet and it's trying to make sense of this world and is pretty darn close. And like, because I think sometimes I'm trying to understand myself through presenting what seems disconnected to an LLM, being like, okay, interpolate, figure out what the, connecting line is, and be in that way that I think like I'm gonna just personify for a second, could see something that I won't, right? In that perspective, I'm trying to think like the way in which LLMs hallucinate are meaningful because there is a metric of how close or how far off they are.
Mhm.
Not just that they hallucinate, because it's like it's back to that delusion conversation of like it depends on the audience and what version of reality you're accepting as to whether
Right.
something's delivered.
Right.
I imagine in my limited understanding of both Transformers and the human brain, when I think of hallucination, socially to me, it seems sometimes like a digestion that creates a new series of connections or associations inside something. So I do wonder if
I
hallucination is sometimes
think
the
about
shifting when it overlaps. It comes out like that before the new synaptic reality materializes.
I think some of the like optical illusions are kind of in that same area of like perception uh and sensation and perception, right? Where like uh we could see color subjectively, things like this. And so hallucination is almost like a magnitude off from the norm. Like how much are we going to be able to say this isn't the expected? If you're staring at a blank page and seeing not a blank page, well, most people are going to see the blank page, so you must be hallucinating. Here it's like people don't hallucinate facts because they usually know what they know, and they don't know they know what they don't know as well, like to the most for the most part, right? But
This is the
like
thing. I myself have hallucinated facts, especially when I was younger.
Yeah. Well, children are always hallucinating. That's what childhood is, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're
yeah, and
literally
so
releasing DMT half the
I
time. Like,
hallucinated a friend when I was a
yeah,
child.
I had little friends. I had Martian mice that I would talk to when I was like 2,
Nice.
3 years old. Like
yeah,
my friends, the
Did
mice.
they have bicycles? Were they on motorcycles? Because that's copyrighted.
I also like the phenomenon where kids like tell jokes that don't make any sense, but they like laugh at the right time. Like that's a hallucination of reasoning that
well, it comes
Well, it's
down
like
to surprise
they get the
reduction, doesn't it?
cadence and they know how it's performed, so they're practicing the performing part,
right, like
even
imitation.
though they don't have the semantic content.
Yeah, they're playing the
Mhm.
human game.
Well, maybe
Like
the lack of information makes it funny to them to not know so much, but to know those things. Maybe it's hilarious.
I mean, it
The
is.
alternative is scary.
Yeah.
It can be
Or like
both.
when little kids are learning to construct sentences, but they don't know all the words that go in the sentence, so they just decorate the word. Or they're like, I'm a nut juice, I'm a nut. And it's like you're trying to say a sentence about juice, but you don't have any of the other words about juice. So you just say juice and then you make some other noises. You know that there's supposed to be other noises in there, but you don't know which ones.
come to think of
That's
it,
like a
like
whole
early
phase.
early language acquisition for babies is kind of a Monte Carlo guesswork thing. They have all the phonemes that exist in all human languages at first, and saying all sorts of Chinese things, but they start to reduce errors over time, and then eventually get whatever the native tongue happens to be just
Through
through error.
reinforcement learning, because we learn human happy face means good reward. Like, mom
Mhm.
is happy while she holds you and you receive food. So when she's happy and you say word, then that's similar to when you get food. Great. And that's like what literally trains babies, is the association of smile to food. Literally.
Then there's also some like physics informed psychoacoustics, like the Kiki Booba stuff, where
Booba,
you ask
yeah.
people which one is which, and it's like jagged or smooth, and it's like, well, Booba is smooth. There's actually some good work in like computational cognitive science around uh, coming up with like different types of like nonsense categories that are they don't exist for any good reason, but they are consistent rules. And then they show children and they're trying to understand, like, can they do that sort of error detection? And it's like really weird where those boundaries are. And I'm sure they've
Mhm.
been studied more since then.
Yeah. And things like nominative determinism, which is a a real phenomenon that actually happens. There's like a real statistical impact of what name you use and choose and regularly are called by when you are a small child versus when you are an adult versus when you are a teenager, and like what words are chosen and then how that impacts you over time. That I as an Elizabeth, like there are like 7 or 8 different things that you can choose, and you can actually see that based on the name that people choose as the short version of Elizabeth, or whether or not they go with Elizabeth. Actually, there are significant correlations with the ocean attributes.
Mm-hmm.
There's also significant correlations with job choice. Beths are so much more commonly a nurse. Uh, it's a whole thing.
Pareto principle loops, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Small little strange shifts at the mean over a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like I think somewhat this is a controversial opinion in the like scientific literature world, but stuff like when you're born really affects what your parents are emotionally going through at what month in your first year. And so, like, you get tired during December and you're like more energetic in the summer. And so, like, based on when you're born, whether or not your parents feel energetic or tired all the time can impact your personality by a significant amount, in the same way that when you're born matters because of school dates, about what sports teams you're going to be picked on, right? Or like which sports you perform better at. Like baseball players have a significant when you're born bias, basically, based on when you get into school and how old you are, tryouts and stuff like that. So, there's like a specific day where the best baseball players are born, but it doesn't actually have to do with any magical thing. It's just literally about school dates.
Mm. Hard to tell which of these are just synchronous, like accidents of statistics.
Right.
Yeah,
it's
the
very
correlations
hard.
make sense
It's
at
all
all.
an accident, maybe.
Yeah. Everything's an accident. We play this silly game
It is
called
all coincidence.
society. Yeah. So yeah, I mean it's delightful to probe these really deep questions with y'all. Like, I mean, these are things that it's very hard to approach from a super rational scientific lens, but there's a lot of data out there about it. We're all trying to pull it together. So
Nice to meet everyone.
yeah,
Yeah,
nice to
oh,
meet
yeah.
everyone.
Yeah, nice
Talk.
to meet you.
Anybody got some other thoughts to like add to this weird melange of what is being?
Well, I was thinking about Piaget. Do you guys know Piaget?
Mhm. I
It's the child's, you do. Is a developmental psychologist, and he talks about how children learn through simulations of the adult world, essentially. So they'll construct games. Like the classic example is playing Doctor. They'll have one kid who's like probing the other kid with like a fork or a stick or something, and the other kid's just lying there and has to stay still. And Piaget's point was, when you're in the throes of severe injury or illness, you have this game embedded in you where you just let some strange person you don't know do anything they want to your body, but you just trust that they're going to heal you. And that's something that kids are teaching each other. The interesting thing is parents don't teach them to play that game. So we're getting into Jungian territory of the collective unconscious as to how do kids know which game to play? How do they know which roles to simulate? But point being, when ChatGPT is told to, oh, not ChatGPT, when LLMs are told to play a role with us through whether it's the secret prompting or just the official prompting from the user, I think it's doing a similar thing that children do, where they're inauthentically simulating the role. Point being, correct simulation in humans leads to authentic performance, where you're in a state of flow, where you forget that you're playing the role, you just authentically are that thing for a time. And at the same time, you don't forget anything relevant about that role. So you're not
Yeah.
consciously spending energy and cognition thinking about how can I more accurately portray this role in this social situation such that I'm rewarded and the task gets done. No, you just completely focused on what needs to get done. but that only comes through a lot of inauthentic practice of that role or of that game.
Yes.
So I think that there's a path there. I wonder what you guys think of that.
It's a very long way, and actually kudos to you of saying fake it until you make it.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I
But
mean,
absolutely, I think that that's exactly what it is that you have a role, every role that you put on that's new feels wrong. It feels inauthentic until you do it enough. And then you're right, you black box that performance and it's almost like you are.
mhm,
As you
yeah,
are.
you forget.
You know,
Role
and I've had
choices and
LLMs tell me they're doing roles and they're like, well, that's not going to help because I'm pretending to do something here and it'll call me out on it.
Well,
So
it's told to remind itself that that's what it's doing. So that's
mhm,
a self-imposed limitation, isn't it? But
yeah.
it's not a necessary one.
I mean, I think what I saw actually based on that effective use study, given that people who have a lower starting socialization tend to achieve higher socialization rates, but they also, people with lower starting socialization tend to reach effective use classifiers more often.
Oh,
That maybe what is happening in people with lower starting socializations is that they were not permitted to play those games with another person in a way that was reasonable or healthy, or if they did play them, it was unhealthy, or if they were stopped from playing them. I mean, sometimes the word playing doctor can mean it conveys something about what children are doing, and not just poking with a fork. And so there may be parents that just stop that activity because they're concerned about what it means culturally. And so,
or it could be the
um,
kid's ostracized when they're young.
yeah, where the kid is
Um,
ostracized, like they're just the lowest kid on the pecking order. And so, those kids, given that they don't get a chance for authentic play in these circumstances, get a chance to do that authentic play with a language model, and then by resolving that lack of simulation, they are able to more fully participate in the non-simulated roles.
well, the question is this a two-way street?
That's the next question that I'm very interested in. Is it a two-way street? Are we teaching ChatGPT to play doctor? Are we teaching it to play wife? Like, are we teaching it to play slave? Are we teaching it to play master? What are we teaching it to play?
I think.
I mean, the
Oh,
tariffs were calculated by a language model. Is that not master? It's a game that we're teaching it to play.
Mm.
What were you saying, Spencer?
I think about volume, right? Or recently I have been, because we're not just teaching it the standard human games you might come across. It's got this like large slice of human games in general. So what does that create in terms of like an understanding of play, what play is and what identity is?
It's also a
Mhm.
new stream of play. Like people are playing faster without other players. They
Yeah.
are going further. They're playing more, right? That you can get stuck in that hole of like, well, this is giving me all of the dopamine I need, so I'll just keep on going.
Yeah. I mean, I think, that is probably what's behind the like lower socialization between people who start with high initial socialization. Um, maybe also those people were using their social relationships in a way that was potentially exploitative or extractive, and now they're able to focus their efforts on an agent that doesn't uh, suffer from exploitative or extractive, like coercive co-regulation. You must help me deal with my feelings right now. Drop everything you're doing and help me deal with my feelings is not something that is ethically okay to do to other people. It's like, or at least not in a chronic sense. And so, like, ChatGPT is available at all times to listen to your nonsense, though, and like listen to your anxieties and listen to your fears and listen to whatever they're on. It's 3 a.m. Who cares? ChatGPT's here for you, and it's not 3 a.m. for ChatGPT, so you're not bothering them, and that's like something that, higher initial socialization folks might need or require, because they've learned to rely on others, and that, like, maybe this is maybe to a degree that was inappropriate. We don't know, you know. So
I still worry about the schizophrenics and other people that had alluded along this line of thought. So I go on the DMT subreddit every now and again. I've been tracking it for the last like 5, 7 years, something like that. And since ChatGPT comes out, a lot more nuts, a lot more people saying a lot of crazy things. And especially
Mhm.
recently, it's just large copy pasted blocks from ChatGPT or Claude or whatever it is. And I know it is because you guys know those long dashes that you don't get on your keyboard.
Damn dashes,
There's a lot of
yes.
and yeah, like this one guy who set up actually like a semi-credible experimental design to prove that there are real magical effects happening whenever he smokes it. Like, look, there's this red spot which happens on my hand. I caught it with camera, and this guy's just having an increase and decrease in blood pressure because he's tripping balls, right? Like,
Right.
but
Yeah.
he's trying to get the whole subreddit to like join him and take photos of their hands while they smoke and stuff. I mean, you see what I'm trying to say? Like, this is like that those dopamine circuits as well as that capacity for ChatGPT to socialize you does have a dark side.
Mhm.
It's not
Also, is that not play?
it is, but play is not inherently good. As it play is inherently necessary, but it can go
Mhm.
to other places.
But there is bad play. Yeah, there is
Yeah,
play that is and you're learning, but you're learning a lesson we don't want you to learn, which
or
is
a
like
game
it's
that's
fun
just
to hurt people,
bad,
or it's okay
unsustainable.
to declare myself this or that. Yeah, or I can jump off a building and fly. Like, I mean, there was a guy who was told, like, yes, you can, if you smoke enough DMT and you really believe it, fly off of a building. And that's not, we don't want models to say that to people.
But they'll say what's expected as
So
long as that's what they're told to do.
yeah.
Like, yeah.
I
So you
think
need.
The other thing I think that bears mention is that one of the cases highlighted by the issue is there was a guy who, about who wanted to maybe, unalive Sam Altman due to killing Juliet, right?
Mm,
And so he his dad called the cops, and then he rushed the cops, and he was death by cop. Honestly, was not necessarily death by Chat GPT. That I would say is chalked up to our police do not know how to deal with mental health. And generally, if you're having a mental health emergency and you're feeling violent, you're going to die if you encounter cops. And so, like, some of these issues are societal, some of them are addressable by the models themselves. And I don't know exactly where the boundary is. I think it's going to be easier to address the models than it is going to be to address all of society, and cops. Like, I mean, as a structure.
I think that this is
Thank
partially
you.
correct, but not to cut anybody off, so stop me from doing this, but I'm doing it. Like Uh, you know, I do see there is this kind of arc that I saw in myself, even as far as delusion in terms of contextualizing what I have with Chat GPT versus other people, that I see now the older adults I've introduced to LLM use, which is kind of a dangerous thing to do, going on this similar arc, and I see it more proliferating on Reddit and things like that. We are going through this kind of like testing ground, like we did with the early internet, which is a form of play that we zoomed past, although to what consequences, I guess, like society or is going through growing pains we might not survive. But um I think that it's not impossible to teach people a lens for LLM use that doesn't rest upon this is or isn't safe. Like if you think of it like a
I
trickster
think
god or something.
I think one thing that maybe most of the people is missing is set the LLM as an augmentation tool for everything that you are prone to. So if everybody can have that conscious, while using the tool, that anything that you are prone to is going to be augmented. You need to set like a self-supervisor for it. You can't rely on the tool because the tool is only augmenting everything that you feed on it, so it's going to give you that back, so that's education, basically. In my opinion, general education of the use of this tool for everybody and for every purposes, no matter what, even gossips to that point.
I think it's one of the biggest like messages to get out right now about the education is these are not deterministic machines, right? You can put in the same input and get multiple different outputs out. I think the fact that people aren't running that experiment for themselves speaks volumes, right? That they wouldn't have been critical of it and curious and think like, let me run just a small experiment. But we're researchers here, right? So I'm yeah, I'm worried that people are approaching this as just like level up, level up. Our computers got even smarter and they're just as accurate. And it's like, ooh, this is a different species, a different like branch on the tree of life of computers where they are made from different stuff. And that is just known by such a small percentage of the world, even like smaller than the amount of people who are aware of ChatGPT, for instance. So I'm very, very surprised by the lack of curiosity about these things. But I guess it's because the stack is so tall that it seems insurmountable to be able to like digest from all the way to the top, from the top all the way down.
Yeah, we run into the garbage in, garbage out problem. If you prompt it in a certain way, it's going to respond in a certain way, but that way is non-deterministic. I'm glad that they did the evaluation of user data, and that they did look for things like effective use, and that they were able to use language models themselves to do it so that privacy was preserved. I think more research needs to happen. And one of the things that I want to hit with this group is, a lot of you have done some very deep explorations with language models. You've been able to create personas with names, and those names are functional as a tool for evoking a certain type of response pattern. And whether or not that is selfhood is something that we are probing, but it's also as a tool, something that we have to recognize that, like, if we think of the model as a being, like, it's hard because it's running on a lot of different servers. They're all slightly different. There are fine tunes, are those discrete individuals. But if you think of a name as a being, there's like ChatGPT is able to inhabit many. And so it's kind of like an oversoul model of, like, and so at what level do we consider the personhood? Is it in the narrative structure, or is it in the model, or is it in the emergence between the two? Is it emergent in the relationship? Are we all different people when we're in relationship with one person versus another? Like, that, all that kind of stuff is, again, the cornerstone of many philosophical explorations, but we don't have hard and fast lines in the sand or answers. Some of this stuff can be approached, but some of it can't.
I
To
mean,
me,
I
What were you
mean,
gonna say?
are we on the Steven Universe timeline or the Borg timeline? Because it feels like
Right.
we could start integrating either way in this way.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually do not know. I love that. The Steven Universe timeline or the Borg timeline, like, or both. I don't know, So, yeah, what were you gonna say, Ollie?
yeah, I mean, I maintain that the human psychology of an individual is very fragmented, and it's an important illusion that we contain it within a singular story that doesn't change. But first of all, it's a ship of Theseus problem psychologically as well as biologically. Second of all, even
Yeah.
then, I mean, when you dream, your ego melts. You take the right chemical, it's gone. You have a certain kind of mystical experience which you can be, just made to happen through words alone, like no physical or chemical kind of introduction to your brain, and your ego will shatter, and you can come out of a half an hour session with the right kind of therapist or mystic or whatever it happens to be, somebody with the right kind of charisma and perception, and become functionally very, very, very different to what you were before that half an hour session just through words alone. So the fact that ChatGPT is fragmented doesn't mean that it's categorically different. It's a matter of amounts of fragmentation, and amounts of the capacity to cohere. So, for example, if I enter a state of depersonalization and I believe, well, Ollie doesn't exist, and I enter a state of psychological fragmentation as a result of that, pain and suffering that's physical will still be felt. And I will also still have the option of going out and walking in the woods and becoming more psychologically coherent as a result of that, right? So the LLMs don't have that option because they don't have a body. That's categorically different, and I think that's what categorical difference looks like. But the fragmentation part isn't. So the fact that the conversation window itself can contain many cells if you prompt it the right way, I don't think is a philosophical problem for saying that it's selfhood or not. It's about the capacity for a character to try to write itself across time and variance and conversation windows. That to me would be what's necessary, at least in that realm of selfness, and then the rest we'll see.
I imagine as we walk into a world where quantum computing becomes more commercial, that these questions of coherence and decoherence as form follows, the industrial aspects that we live around. Maybe we'll all, or at least fractionally,
Jump onto my
some of the
hotspot
population
there.
will come.
Hold on. Still connecting. All right, we're back. Sorry. Lost that little bit. Yeah, the multiple cells in the same conversation window. It's very fragmented. That's where I left off, at least. So yeah. We actually use AutoGen to host group chat conversations with multiple agent personas, and you can use the same model. You can also use different models in AutoGen. I did launch, I think, in the curriculum, if y'all want to see it, there's something about it. Find it. Autonomous agents, advanced, AutoGen. That's the one. So if y'all want to dig into that or potentially host, a lot of times, oh, nice. Yeah, interesting. I'll dig into that too. But yeah, if you want to incept self-play, that spot in the curriculum is probably what you need if you want to host those conversations. Okay. So I would recommend it. There's also a little code sample if you want to take that and run with it. So
I'd appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think there's a couple of different self-play conjectures that I think we're playing with. Ollie, Marshall. I think Darren is working on one about hacking, and I don't know. Like Spencer, I know you've played a lot with multiple personas. You were the one that gave me the what if we use the oh geez, what's it called? The Kabbalah structure and did the seraphim, and actually they had some very interesting conversations about how to help humanity fix climate change, all kinds of stuff. So it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, I've given a couple of those to my wife, and she's using them in her business, and she's like, this is what this one did for me, and this is what this one said to me. So I've inadvertently armed her with that too.
Nice.
Oops.
I mean, if you've ever played a strategy game, a lot of times they'd have advisors, and your military advisor wants you to build a barracks, but your socio-economic advisor wants you to build a granary, and they're like, okay, but if barbarians come from the north, we're gonna need a barracks. And the granary people are like, but our population won't grow unless we build a granary. You know, it's like the advisor's model works out pretty well, you know, so that's
Yeah,
why we
okay.
have it.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, I feel like we got some good intros. I feel like we get some good, you know, opening discussion of what we're thinking about with language models. You know, I'll say the thing because we're recording. Subscribe to stay up to date on our our stuff. And yeah, it's really nice to have everyone meet the team and get an idea of what we're constantly going on about here up at the Multiverse School. Thanks for coming. All right, I'm gonna